So today I'll be talking about modeling in GoldSim uh, when it has to do with time series data and in particular monthly data related to a calendar month. And this might seem like a somewhat arbitrary topic that's kind of small, but it does come up quite a bit, and there are a few tricks to learn about here. I think that might be useful. However, a lot of the content is geared more toward the beginner, but I think that those of you that are experienced GoldSim users might find some of this useful. So what I'd like to do is in this presentation, I'll be working with some real data. Before I get to that, though, I'd like to just talk a little bit about some of GoldSim's run properties. And so what I'll do is I'll just start up a blank GoldSim model here. And one thing you can do is in the browser window that's over here on the left, you can right-click and say Show Element Subitems, and then this window pops up, which is it's called Local Properties. We also call the outputs in here, we call them Run Properties of GoldSim. These are just properties that have names that you can refer to in your expressions in GoldSim that are related to the simulation properties, mainly for time. And in fact, there's only, I think, one output in here that does not have, two that don't have anything to do with time, and that's the realization and number of realizations. But the rest of these all have to do with time in your simulation. So first of all, obviously, when you first build a model, you'd want to consider what's the time basis and what's the time frame and time step of your model. Obviously, those things can change throughout the building process of your model. And also, it's a good idea to try to think when you're building your model, try to think about it in a way that you could, in the future, change something about the time stepping or duration or even the time basis and still have an accurate model. It's possible well, maybe it's difficult in some cases, but it's a good idea to try to think about your model in a way that it would still work. For example, if you changed the time step, it's a good idea to try to make it independent of the time step. Sometimes we have to create an element in the model, an expression that simply defines globally what your assumed calculation step or time step is, and it would be defined by you, a user-defined variable, rather than referring to GoldSims, because you might change it in the future. And so if you have calculations based on that assumption, then you might want to have that global, which is something I've talked about in the past. But anyway, let's just talk about some time settings first. In this model, what I want to do is I want a calendar basis, because we'll be talking about months, calendar months. But just keep in mind that with the time basis, which is shown here, and those of you that are okay, so somebody missed how I brought up thank you for asking, by the way. Somebody missed how I brought up these local properties over here. Yeah, when you open up GoldSim, likely you will not see this folder here, and you will see all of the other. So for example, if I have other elements, you'll see all the other elements, but you won't see this. You just right click and click on Show Element Subitems. Just right click in here. That's all you have to do to display that. And it's not necessary to have these displayed, but sometimes it's good just to know if and where you are referring to some of these run properties. So for example, let's say I add a new expression here that I just want to refer to the current month that it is simulating. So I would just refer to this item over here under Local Properties, Calendar, Time, and Month. So that's this run property. And to access all of the run properties, you can just hold down the Shift key and type tilde symbol. That little squiggly line is above the Tab key. When you type that, GoldSim will list all of the variables that start with that character. And it's just a temporary character in this case. This is the one case where this character is just it's just temporary. You type it in, And then you start typing the variable, in our case month. I just hit the tab key to complete that, and there it is. However, when I click out of the expression and back in, then you see that little squiggly symbol is gone now. It's just a way to essentially access all of the possible run properties within GoldSim very quickly, in case you don't remember the name of it exactly. Okay, so we've now referred to one of the run properties, and now you can see here in the list of run properties, you see there's a blue symbol next to where it says month, indicating that it is being used in your model. And let's say we have a couple of these let's say we're using it in a couple of places in your model. So then what you can do, I just copied and pasted this element. So then you can right click. If you right click on any of these elements, it won't do anything. However, if there is a blue symbol here indicating this variable is in use, right click, then you'll see an effects option. When you click it, then GoldSim, a browser will appear showing you all of the expressions in your or all of the elements in your model that have a reference to the month property. Okay, so this is useful if you, maybe you didn't realize that you're using one of these properties and you want to know where they are. Then that would be a good option there. I'm just going to give this a name of sim month, so I don't conflict with the name month. You can't put the name month here and have it here. So we have to give that a separate name. Now what I want to do is go back to the simulation settings. So I'll go up here to the simulation settings button, and then let's look at the time basis again. So when you look at the simulation settings, there's a lot going on here, but just know the importance. Well, everything's important in here, but this first button up here, this is just to show you where GoldSim plans to save time history results, and also reporting period results. We'll talk about reporting periods later, but you can see this is very straightforward in this case because we have a duration-based or an elapsed time-based model here. It says elapsed time. So this is just showing us that it starts at time 0 and walks forward on a 1-day time step, which, by the way, is the default for any new GoldSim model. Okay, so we're going from 0 to 100, and it just shows us here that there's these H symbols. There's a legend up here. H means time history result. So we're going to have a time history result on all of these time points. Okay, so that means that what if we have an inserted event? Okay, so let's go here to the events, and then I'll just add a new triggered event. What I want to do is I want to add an event that happens at a time that is not scheduled. So for example, if I come here to trigger this event, and I'll just say, I want this to happen on, not on a date. I don't have, well, we can reference dates in this model, even though it's elapsed time. But it doesn't make as much sense to do it because we're doing an elapsed time simulation, which is supposed to, it's intended to be a simulation that doesn't necessarily refer to a calendar, right? It's just doing some arbitrary future period that could be any start time, and going forward for a specified duration. So we're just going to say E time, and then I'm just going to say at 1.578 days. So this is a strange time. It's going to put that step at that point. If I run this model, and by the way, I don't need to run it for 100 days. I'll just run it for 40 days. No reason to go very long. So now when I run this model, I just click the run button there. When I run this model and I look at the output of this event, just right-clicking, I'm just going to, instead of right-clicking on the element, in this case, I'm going to the output port because I want to see a secondary output called event count. And you can see just by hovering over it, it shows that this triggered. And then I go to time history result, and it shows that on day 2, it has triggered 1 time. Well, it's important to note what we are reporting here and at what times. If I go to the table view, you can see here that we have day 0, 1, and then 2. There's an event that occurred. But I asked this to occur at a specific strange time of 1.578 days. Okay, so let's add a time history element that will look at specifically at that event count. So I'm just linking the event count output to this time history. And keep in mind, again, if we go to the simulation settings, that what this time history is intended to show us are values at these points only. That's what its intention is. We run the model, we look at the result, and that's what we see. Okay, same thing, no big deal. However, if we want to see everything, then we can go here to the advanced button here in the simulation settings. So that's advanced down here. You'll see here that GoldSim is allowing unscheduled updates. That's the kind of thing that occurs with events like this. And then we can check this box down here, include unscheduled updates, high resolution results in scalar histories. So in some of your time histories, you can see this. You can see values other than just the planned scheduled update times. And then when you open up this history, you'll see that this output, because it's scalar and because we're not running Monte Carlo simulation, it shows us that yes, it's going to provide us high resolution results. So then we run this model again, and we open this up, and you can see in the table view that on exactly day 1.578, we have an inserted, we have an event that occurs there at exactly that time. So this time did happen in the model. And this might seem like kind of a weird thing to do, in the model. Why would I insert an event at this weird time? Well, it turns out that GoldSim does this a lot. Maybe when you don't realize it. It does it for all of your reservoirs and pool elements. If you have bounds, you'll have these events occurring if you allow them, that is. And so it's important to realize that these things are happening in between steps, and this differentiates GoldSim from a spreadsheet, for example, in that it's inserting events like that. So it's really important to keep that kind of thing in mind. All right, so let's go back to the simulation. And I'm just going to get rid of this. That was just kind of a side note. Let's go back to the simulation settings, and let's change this model to be calendar-based. And the reason I want to do this is because I'm just going to show you a couple of run properties that have to do with the calendar. And I'll just change this back to 100 days. And we can just start it. We can just have it starting on today, today's date. That's fine, no big deal. Then come down here. It's a good idea just to select one of the calendar-based options just as a kind of a precaution. It's okay to say 1 day right here. However, if you change this, or you could change this this unit here to, for example, you might be thinking, well, it should be a month, so I'm just going to type in the unit for month. Well, this would not be a good idea in a calendar model because this is a unit, which I'll talk about in a second. But what we want to do is use these options, especially if you're going to have a calendar month time step. You definitely want to choose this option here. Anyway, I'm just going to change this to days for now. And now I want to look at my simulation month. And I will add that there. And then now that I have that history, just run this model. And you can see that it is incrementing. This is the month counter. So in January, it has a value of 1. And in February, it has a value of 2. We can look at the values here with the actual dates. And you can see it's just walking through time here until we get to January 1. It's incremented to a 2. And then when we get to March 1, it's incremented to a 3. And so on. You will notice, though, that there's something strange going on about these time increments. That's because we're still looking at high resolution results. And the way that this works when you're dealing with high resolution, and by the way, this really is intended just for debugging your model, not for production mode. We recommend that you only use high resolution result options for just debugging, looking at things, trying to figure out where a step is being inserted, that kind of thing, not for just general purpose. So what I need to do is go back to the simulation settings, to the advanced, and uncheck the option to show high resolution results. Now when I run the model, now you can see it shows all the values every day, and then indeed it does increment at the right times. And here's March 1. So, and you can also see that it's accounted for the number of days in each month. There we have 228 and so on. Now, what happens if we refer to a different type of run property? Let's say, for example, the E month, because that's one of them in here. If you go close the calendar time container and you go to elapsed time, you'll see there's E month right there. So let's add this one. Put an E in front of that to refer to E month, and then I'll add this to the history. Run the model again. Now E month, it's an elapsed. How many have elapsed? At the beginning of the simulation, no months have elapsed yet. And you see here that we aren't starting on the first day of a month. We're starting on the 28th of January. So anyway, you scroll down and you see that on February 28th, it has incremented to a 1, not on March 1, but on February 28th. And the reason it did that actually is because the E month, the elapsed month, is going to be looking at not a calendar month, but an average month. So what's the duration of an average month? If we keep scrolling down, we'll see that it incremented again. This E month incremented on 3/30 instead of 4/1. Now it's 2 days behind. And the reason for this is because, well, there's more days in March, and the average month is less than 31. The average length of a month over a course of an average year is 30.4375 days long, and that's the length of an elapsed month. So you can see how you would want to just be careful about whether if you're using an elapsed time simulation, which of these run properties you refer to, versus if you're in a calendar simulation. And that leads us to the difference between the unit of a month and the run property of a month. Okay, so we've been talking about what this month property is here for a while. Let's now talk about the units. So units are different. Units are units of measurement, and that's what GoldSim has in its units database. So if you go up here to the model menu, then go to units, then here's our unit manager, and scrolling down, we have a time category, and now I created a new month unit just because I was just demonstrating how you can create a new unit. And what you see here is that it has the same definition or value as the built-in month unit of that many seconds. That's because GoldSim converts everything, all of its calculations, to SI units. In this case, it's going to be seconds. So it knows everything in terms of seconds when it deals with time. Just going to remove this one. We don't need that. I'm not using it. Okay, so here it is, month. This unit represents a month, and it is a constant. All units in here are constants. Definitely need to keep that in mind. So it's a constant value of this many seconds. And if you converted that number to days, you would see it's 30.4375 days. That's what this value is. And it's just an average. Same thing with the YR unit. YR is also in terms of seconds, and it's an average of the years, which takes into consideration leap year. So the average, if you converted this number to days, it would be 365.25, not exactly 365. Because it's taken into consideration those once every 4 years. We've got 29 days in February. And so then the month is just dividing this number by 12 and coming up with this number. So as you see, this is not going to be the same concept as a calendar month, right? Because the calendar month, you need to know how many days are in a current calendar month. Well, it turns out we do have. And let me go back to the simulation properties here. In the calendar time container, you'll see there's another one here called days in month. And so this is a good way to, well, I guess I probably don't need to really demonstrate that, but you get the idea. You can refer to days in month, and that will tell you as the simulation progresses, how many days are in this current month that we have. The nice thing about having that property is, in particular, is in the application I want to show you now. And this is when we are dealing with monthly data, and in particular monthly quantities that we then want to convert in our model to a flow rate. Okay, so that leads us to the data set that I'm going to, and that's in this web page here. I went to this USGS database that has a whole bunch of time series data. I went here and I clicked on that site, and then I got some monthly statistics from it, and then downloaded it. So we don't need to go into a lot of detail how I got it, but here's the data set in Excel. Now I just moved it into Excel. I downloaded it as a text file, and then I brought it into Excel. So here's the metadata about it. It tells you the location and what the different parameters are and so forth. Here's the time series of all the data. And then I used pivot tables in Excel to put them into tables that are showing years down the one side, months across the top, for one particular reason that I want to show you. But these are the two ways that I'm showing the data. One is time series with year, month, value, and then pivot table for the different data sets. Okay, so once I had that, then I was able to copy and paste this data into the GoldSim model. So I'll close that. So let's talk about how to go about that. What I want to do is just start with a blank model. And in fact, I'll just start with this one and just delete these guys. Okay, so the first step is to, well, obviously set up the simulation settings to what we want. So that's what I'll do here. It's going to be calendar based. And in this case, I need my dates to be aligned with the data. And I have a historic data set for so starting out, first of all, I just want to start it on an even January 1st. And then my data set it's got some pretty good data starting in 2001. So I'll put that there, and then it's missing some data after 2018. So I'm just going to go 2018 here like that, just for simplicity. And then I'll keep everything else the same. One day time step is fine for now. Okay, so I'll run that in that way, and then I'll come over here to inputs, and then I'll add a new time series. And this time series is going to represent average temperatures over time for this location. So I'll just give this a name, temp. And I'm going to say average because these are monthly averages, and really we should put that in the description, monthly average temperature or something like that, and then give this values. In this case, these are measured in degrees Celsius. And so then I just go back over to the Excel file and do a copy paste. So to do that, then we go to the time series, and I need to go up to 2001, and I need to close my GoToMeeting. Well, it's kind of hard to. I have my GoToMeeting is kind of in the way. Let me just make this a little smaller. Okay. So 2001 is where I have some good data there. So I'll just start there. And then I went down to 2018. Oh yeah, I forgot. I also have this, the way that this data comes in, you can see that it's changing to discharge right there, temperature, discharge. So there's actually two data sets in here, but I think that's where I'm stopping. We could just go all the way down. It doesn't matter. In fact, we could grab this entire data set, and it doesn't matter because the simulation settings are set up. Go back to this model to only simulate a portion of this set. Keep in mind when you paste data into the time series, make sure that you have the time unit set to the correct setting, which in our case is calendar time. We want to have this in terms of dates. This will be the default. It'll be actually dependent on your simulation settings when you create a new element. So if the simulation settings are elapsed time, when you open this, it would say days here. Okay, anyway, so I paste that in, and now I need to go back before I close this. It won't let me close this dialog now until I put values over here. We have to have values in every single cell before it will let us validate and close that. Okay, I'm just going down because I need the value. Put that in. There are my values. Okay, so these are monthly values. And so what that means is that I could run this model on a daily or a monthly time step and calculate the correct monthly average temperature, or not calculate, actually just report the monthly average temperature in a very simple way. Temperature. In fact, I don't even need to have this expression, but I'm going to just put it because I'm referring to a time series. I want it to be a variable in my model. So I'm just going to refer now to the temperature. Very simple and straightforward. Keep in mind that you can do a lookup on a time series now, by the way, if you didn't know that. You can put in here a date value or any kind of time value, and it will then tell you the value at that time. 10 days into the time series, it has that value. You could also put in a date. Dates, by the way, in GoldSim have to be entered with quotes, with double quotes. So I put double quotes in there, and then I just enter a date. And it tells me the value there. If I do a day that's halfway between, so January 15th, it will do a linear interpolation between the value at the first of the month and the end and the first of the next month because I have monthly data. Okay, I don't want to do a lookup. I'm just going to refer to that time series, and then I can run the model and look at the temperature over time. So there's the temperature data. You can look at it in table view too, and it shows you the dates. It's assuming that we're looking at midnight on each day, January 1, January 2, and you can see that the values are slowly changing. This is because of the way we set up the time series. If I go to the time series, you see it represents instantaneous. Okay, well, it could be that, I mean, these are averages, and so it might be better in this case to say constant value over the interval because that's the average for the month, and we don't actually know based on the data set how the values are changing from day to day. The problem with this is that we end up with a data set that is not very realistic on a day-to-day basis. So it really puts into question of, well, is this really the right way to represent an average temperature over time? And I would say no, not on a daily basis, it's not. And so we would need to do something like some interpolation of our own in that case. Or we can be fine with interpolated if we want. Another option is to change the time step, obviously, to monthly. And let's just do that for now. Let's say calendar months. You can see that was a very easy change there. Also, the number of scheduled updates has changed. You can also see that up here. Scheduled updates is now going to show the values or show the times that it will report here for us. They're all on monthly times on the first day of each month because of our start time. What happens if we change this to 15? Then you can see it's still holding to the month, even though we had a start time of 15. After that, it still starts on the first. That's something to keep in mind. Okay, so now we run the model, and now we don't have to worry about interpolation between the points. It only shows the value at the first of each month as we go forward. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward, but what if we want to look at something that's a little bit different? Let's say we have a time series of monthly totals. Okay, so in my Excel file, I have that, but I don't want to go through the effort right now of copy pasting. You get the idea. So I'm just going to assume that we already did that effort. And let's say, for example, that what we have here at this site is quantity values. In this case, 1,000 acre feet. It turns out the USGS data reports values in CFS, cubic feet per second. They're English units. So sorry to those of you that are using metric, but it would be an easy conversion in GoldSim, obviously, to change this to gigaliters, for example, instead of 1,000 acre feet. But that's the symbol for 1,000 acre feet, KAF, 1,000 acre feet. These are quantities. It's a quantity of volume of water. And if you go to edit data, you'll see that we have these quantities here on a monthly basis. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to get the average discharge rate in flow rate from these quantities. Okay, so first I'm going to show you the wrong way to do it. So let's go there first. I'll put a new expression in here and I'll call it discharge average, or let me just to be clear, let me say rate, and then I'll put wrong at the end because this is the wrong way to do it. We could say, well, you know, these are volume units, so I'm just going to put the same volume unit, 1,000 acre feet, and then divided by MON because it's a monthly basis, you know, that I'm looking at it. This is a common mistake that we see. And it's not necessarily that right now I made a mistake, it's just that there's an assumption built in right here. Perhaps you've made an assumption that you've just said, well, it's just a simple conversion of just dividing it by time. In fact, GoldSim will tell you right now, hey, by the way, the unit MON is 30.4375 days, a constant. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so just imagine now that you have a value for monthly discharge in February. Let's just take February, for example. It says 55,000 acre feet in this February. That's a value that accumulated over a period of 28 days, unless it was a leap year, right? So if you divide this value now, which is what GoldSim would be doing, if we do this equation, let me finish the equation. We go back here. If we just put in this equation, refer to the time series, and then divide by 1 month. What that's doing is it's calculating a value, a flow value for that February that would be incorrect. And let's just play this out. Let's see what we get. We can use reporting periods to find out what the quantities would be based on that flow rate. So I'm going to add now a time history that's looking at discharge. And now I will refer to that. And then I need to, I want to look at reporting periods, but I don't have them set up yet. In fact, I think it's not going to let me. Yeah, so I don't have reporting period set up. So I need to go up here to the simulation settings and create reporting periods. The reason I want to do this is because even though I have a monthly time step, reporting periods allow me to quickly quantify some important statistics at period time. So I'm going to change this back to daily, to do daily time steps. Or I could just say none. I could say no basic step if I wanted to. I'm just going to change it to something else. And then I'm going to come down here and say I want to look at annual and monthly reporting periods. That's the default when you select this option. And then I'm just going to give these names like that, year and month. You'll see down here it's going to now save results at only the reporting steps. That's it. If I go up here to show scheduled updates, you'll see that it's not showing anything on all these days. No values until I scroll down and I see that, oh, it shows one on in July 1. So it's only showing them on the reporting periods. Now we could change that. We could change this to say show reporting steps and basic steps. So that would be daily, monthly, annual, it would show all of those things. Right now, reporting steps is fine. So I'm going to go back here to this time history, and I'm going to change this to reporting periods. And then what I could do is I could say, well, I would like to see what the discharge rate is on a cumulative basis for the reporting period. So now I can select a period result that I'm interested in this case, cumulative. And then you'll see immediately GoldSim changes the display unit up here based on that change. It's trying to say, well, you have to put another time unit in there. So it says dash day. Well, that's not very useful. This unit is actually it would be very difficult to understand. So I'm just going to delete that part and say, no, it's just going to be quantities that I want to show. Okay. And that's, again, that is based on this expression we put in here, as you might recall. So I run the model and I open up this, and it shows me by default the major reporting period, but I can change the period here to month. It shows me the month, and then I can come here to the table and I can see that in February, well, January it's 22, February it says 20,000 acre feet. Let's compare that to the actual data itself. And I need to scroll down to 2001, by the way. So 2001, it says 24. Over here, it says 22. February says 20.5. That one actually looks pretty close. March says 24. March says 25. So anyway, the point is they're not the same. So that's a problem, right? So we're not calculating the right thing. So let's modify this and do it the right way. The first thing I want to do is, just because out of habit, I like to have the time series element kind of be like separate. It's data. It's not really part of the calculations of your model yet. And so usually what I do is when I'm referring to time series, I always just have a place where I just refer to it before I do any equations on it, just to kind of have a place that says, hey, here's my kind of starting point of my model. I might change my data later on, but the starting point is always here. And so globally, I can always refer to that. The nice thing about doing this kind of thing is that you can swap out your data and not have to go all over the place in the model and find all the places that it's referring to this time series, because I swapped out the time series with a different type of data. For example, you might later want to change this to a lookup table, and that would be very painful to do it if you have 100 places in your model that's referring to this time series. So I always like to have a habit of referring to the time series as it is, so that it can be the global place that the starting place for referring to it. I'm just going to call this discharge totals, and because I'm just referring to the time series, that's all I'm going to do here. That's all I'm doing. So this is my starting point. Everything in the model is going to refer to this guy, not this one. Okay, now that I've done that, now I can create the element that I'm interested in. Okay, so this one is now going to refer to the totals, and I'll call this one the discharge rate. And I can give this any unit. I could, in fact, say 1,000 acre feet per MON, no problem, because it's just a way of displaying. It has nothing to do with the actual calculations or how they're being operated on. But because I mentioned before CFS, I'm just going to say it. We're going to do cubic feet per second, and now obviously I have to convert this rate to a correct flow rate. And the way I want to do that is I want to refer to the calendar months when I do it. So I'm going to divide this by some sort of time. And in our case, we need to know how long what's the duration of each calendar month. So I'm going to use parentheses, and in here I will refer to another run property. I mentioned it before, it's days in month. And then this is a unitless counter that all it does is say whether it's 30 or 31 or 28 or 29. So I need to give it units. I'm just going to put a space D, or space day, just to make sure that we're talking about units there, number of days in the month. Now, once again, we're in a situation where this data could change. This data could become quantities over the quarter or quantities over a day, and then all of a sudden this calculation is incorrect. So ideally, once again, we need to add yet another expression that we would say it's the time basis or the period unit or period duration or something like that. I'm not sure what we would call it, but this is the thing that it's the basis for the quantities defined in this time series. And in our case, I'm just going to give it units of day. It doesn't really matter what those units are. I'm going to give it units of day, and then I'll just call this days in month, day, like that. Oh, in fact, I don't even need parentheses here, right? Yeah, okay. So that's the period duration that we're going to be using for this time series data set. And it's just a way, you'd want to kind of put these two things together, kind of have them close together and just say, look, this data set, whatever I put in here, it's going to have this assumed duration for those quantities that we're calculating all the time. It is important to do that. It might seem like this is overkill, but in the end, if you plan on ever changing that data, it could be that you change it later. Then you'd want to highlight that, hey, we're doing a conversion, a very important conversion in this model, quantities to flows, and it's very important that we have the correct duration in there. So then we can do it that way. So now we've got the date, the calendar months accounted for, and then, also we need to refer to the correct thing there. I don't want to refer to the time series, right? I only want to refer to its starting point there. Okay, so now what we can do is we can look at that discharge rate here and also look at cumulative. It's got the same units. Run the model and look at our results, and you can see this says, let's see, 2001 February. Well, let's see. This is not what I expected. I'm not getting the same answer here. This is January 1, 2001. It's showing 24, and I am showing 22. So what am I doing wrong at this point? I guess I need to think about this for a second. This is not what I expected. Let's see here. 1,000 acre feet. Okay. Well, I'll have to come back to this at the end. I don't want to spend a lot of time with it at the moment, but there's something I'm not accounting for here. So I will come back to this in a second. And was I looking at 2018? I don't remember, but let me just come back to it. I just want to say a few things because we're getting close to the end of this, and then I'll circle back. I mentioned before that we might need to do some interpolation, and so I just wanted to point you to some places in our website. So let me go there. When you're dealing with interpolation of monthly data, one of the things that you can do is go to our help center here, and in here, if you just typed in, for example, interpolation, Then you would see some of the interpolation options that we have. A lot of these are for monthly data examples, but you can do it depending on the type of data you can have. You can do it for time series, you can do it for lookup table, you can do it for even a data element. Let's say you had a data element with 12 values in it. You could use this model example to do a cubic spline interpolation between the data and the interpolated value result here. And this is a little bit cleaner way to do an interpolation instead of just the linear interpolated, because linear interpolation will just interpolate between the starting points of each of these monthly values, which would kind of look like a shift. It would look like it shifted backward in time by half of a month, and so that could be a problem. So some of these interpolation examples that we have here might be useful for you to take a look at. Another one that you might want to do is, and I'm just going to open up a model here. This is also in our library, and it's a way to do what the reporting periods do. The reporting periods will show you, what's the cumulative amount for the particular month or year. And that's nice that it shows you that, but you might want to calculate it and have it as an output in the model so that you can use it going forward. That's maybe a little bit more rare of a case, but if it does come up, you can use this example model to do it. So in this case, we have some data that is daily right here. And then what we can do is look at what is the monthly min, average, max, statistics. What are the monthly statistics for all of the years of record in that time series? And you can do that with this simple model that you can download from our site. Just look up monthly annual totals, and you can find this model. There's some array calculations that it has to do that is a little bit tricky, and so that's why we included that in the model. But this is really just about having some of that statistical data ready for you to use in the simulation instead of just reporting it at the end, which is what the time history was doing in that case. Okay, so let's see. That's okay. Yeah, that's a good well, and I can show you what this looks like when we run it. So you might have a history that looks like that, but then you might want to look at what's the monthly averages. Those are the monthly averages across all of the years, which might be useful to have. We have annual, monthly. Here's monthly and annual, though that's not very useful in a graph. Oops, I didn't mean that. And there we go. So you might want to see all of the monthly average values for all of the years. You could do that in that form. Okay, so those are some useful tools. I just wanted to bring those up, before we end this. But now back to the main issue, which is really bothering me at the moment, which is why we are getting the wrong answer here. So I need to think about this for a second. Let's see here. So this is, okay, we have calendar, time, starting in 2001. Okay. So looking at this, why is this showing 22.8 for January 21? Okay. Let's see here. The totals divided by the duration. And then if I also look at the discharge rate or discharge totals, just to make sure we're looking at the same value. Let's see what we're looking at there. Yeah, it looks like we're doing an interpolated value. Let me just see. I think that might be the problem. If I change this to constant, might be because of the interpolations that are going on. Okay, there we go. And and also a delay. I forgot about that. That we quantify the cumulative amount on the following time point, I think, but I'm not for sure about that. So hold on one second. Let me remove this one with the all points. Just comparing those two again. Okay. So now I'm just moving this over, viewing this, and scrolling down. '24, there we go. Okay. Okay. So January 1, 2001, January 1, 2001, 24, and then 20.5. Okay, now we have correct. Now the values are correct. Okay. Thank goodness. I was getting a little nervous there. All right, so the problem was that I had an assumption of interpolating the values between these monthly times. I was representing the data as interpolated over the step instead of assuming that they're constant over that time period. Now, I believe that if I had changed this to a calendar month basis, well, I can't because I have these reporting periods, but if I said no basic step and I was only looking here at this, I believe that it probably would not matter. Let me just check that. Let me just check. If it probably doesn't matter if this is interpolated. Let's see if I'm wrong. Yeah, that's the issue. So what we were doing is we were calculating values, um, every day, and this was slowly increasing over time, providing interpolated values, and that's the reason. Yeah, okay. One of you, thank you, Ted. Yeah, one of you already found that out before I did, but yeah, that's the reason. Okay, so with that, I just want to say it's important that you try to think of ways when you're building the model to isolate, first of all, your data sets. And let me just describe, I've got a couple more minutes. I just want to say that there could be a reason why it might be useful to have your data in a lookup table instead of a time series. And to do that, I'm just going to put this all into a container here and call this time series method. Put everything in there. And then I'm just going to copy and paste. It's the same thing, but it's using lookup tables. And I just want to show how that's done. So in here, it's the same exact thing, except that we have lookup tables instead of time series. And so the way these could be set up for the temperature, we could have it set up with the rows being the years and the months across like that. And then the same thing with the discharge totals. But when you refer to a lookup table, it's different, right? We have to refer to the lookup table and then the row and the column. That's year and month. And so once again, we'll be using the run properties of GoldSim in order to do that kind of a lookup. And because this is resulting in the same output, it's important, again, like I said, refer to have a global variable in the model that is your starting point for the data. And that way you can swap this out with a time series or with a lookup table or whatever, and then it's just changing this one global variable, and everybody's going to refer to that thing going forward in your model. That would be much safer than everybody referring to that, because you might replace it down the road. Somebody asked, if I deliver a dashboard model that takes time series data from a spreadsheet to a client, are they able to build on that time series as new data is generated, and have the player file model retrieve that expanded time series? The answer is yes, but I know you said just a simple yes or no is fine, but I don't want to, I just have to say a couple more things. Let's just say, for example, it's this data set. In this case, it could be a problem because of the way it's formatted. Unfortunately, because of the way it's downloaded from this database online, it downloads it just one after the other like this. So you would obviously, we'd have to have a, this is the raw data, you'd have to format it differently. If you're appending values, in this case, we would maybe do it in a different tab where you allow values to be appended going down more. But anyway, that's kind of a different issue. That's just how are you going to manage the data that's coming in. But let's just say in a simple case that all the client wants to do is just keep the same lookup or same Excel file, but then just keeps adding rows, row after row going forward. The nice thing about GoldSim is when you have it set up to automatically import data, which I'll show you here, by the way. I know this is a lot more than a yes or no, but when you import from Excel, all you do is come here to the data source and change this to import from Excel. And then the nice thing about this is that there's this option here that says read data until first empty value. So yeah, it makes it very easy actually for the client to just add that. The one challenge that you're going to have, however, is that you'll have to make sure that you change your time settings to, if you add more data, then you'd want to increment this value. Instead of 2018, for example, you change it to 2019, if the client adds more. So that's one thing they would have to do in the player. You can do this in the player though. You can set up a player that allows the user to change this information. So just make sure when you generate the player that you allow that, because that's one of the questions that you're asked when you go through the player wizard is, hey, do I want to allow my user to adjust the start and end time? Then if the answer is yes, you check that. So I hope that answers. Yeah, okay, great. All right, so anyway, I realized that I've kind of just covered a kind of a hodgepodge of concepts here. Mostly those being, again, to review, it's that when you're dealing with calendar time basis, just keep in mind that in GoldSim, the unit of MON, month, is a constant, and it refers to the average of all months and not the calendar month. Also, that the run properties month and e-month are very different. Month is the calendar month, e-month is the elapsed average month period of 30.4 days. And then also, when you're converting to and from monthly quantities or annual quantities, that you need to take care in what you're dividing into those values to come up with the correct flow rates over time, and vice versa. If you have flow rates and you want to convert them to quantities, you have to make sure you're multiplying them by the correct amount of time in the calendar month, and you can rely on our run properties to do it properly. So I hope that helps. And I will wait around here for a bit more questions if anybody has any. There is a question actually. Another question, is there a difference between user specified per 1 day and calendar aligned days over 1 day under the simulation settings? Okay. Let me go to the simulation settings and make sure I understand what we're talking about here. Okay. So calendar aligned versus start time aligned. We should probably just go to the help file to look at this, because one thing for me also is that often I need to remind myself what these things represent. But you can see here that there is a section here on the alignment option, and it says here, it says how the steps are aligned. Okay. If user specified is selected, you define a time step with any time unit. Yeah, if you're talking about just this basic step um, of user specified, maybe, oh, I think you were talking about that, huh? Okay, so user specified 1 day versus days, there's no difference. I was just saying it's a good idea to just keep in mind that you have these options, just so that in the case that you might be dealing with months, that you don't accidentally say in over here one MON or even one YR to represent a year in a calendar basis. This is not good, because this is 365.25, right? So it's just a good idea to get out of the uh, habit of having user specified. This would be more applicable to an elapsed time simulation. So instead, you'd want definitely to be referring to the options that are here for the calendar basis. But for alignment, I suggest you go back to our help here and read about what the alignment option does, which it specifies right here in this paragraph. But I realize now that you're talking about the basic step there. So yeah. Okay, so the question was, yeah, whether it matters that we have user specified or days. And you know what? A lot of this is based on just legacy. If you have a legacy model, that's probably why you see it specified here this way. I would guess that's probably where that came from. GoldSim just upgraded the model over the years, and it just ends up here. But now we've done a lot with since GoldSim 11. In fact, we've done a lot with this simulation settings dialog, and it gives you a lot more power here. But yeah, I would say just for um, um, simplicity and just to make sure that it's safe in the future if you decide to go to months. Because, and see, if you had it set up like this, and then later you told somebody, hey, can you change the model to be a monthly model? They might be tempted to just type in MON right here. But if you said days like this, well, I guess they'd be tempted to type 30 in here, but no, you'd want the drop list to months. So yeah, I realize I kind of went on about that question, but anyway, I'll just wait around here a bit if you have any other questions. I think I covered all of them. Somebody asked, is there a difference to specifying the correct length of month in an elapsed time model? Yeah, so elapsed time model is much easier, much less complicated. In an elapsed time model, so if we set this to elapsed time, and if we do that, then calendars are out. We don't really care about a calendar, even though GoldSim does report all of the same run properties, even the calendar ones. It's really not that. It's really not a calendar basis anymore, and so that's all out the window. And now what we would be looking at is indeed one MON for our time step in an elapsed time situation. We would be looking at one MON in this case. Yes, and to do any kind of conversions, it's all very simple and straightforward. You would just divide by 30.4375 days, or just divide everything by 1 MON, because the assumption is that all of the months are the same length going forward. So the calculations would definitely be different in that case if you had an elapsed time simulation. Yeah, so in an elapsed time model, we're not considering leap years. We're not considering the calendar. Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, good questions. Those are good questions. Anything else? If there isn't anything else, then I'll just wait around here a bit more in case someone's typing a question. All right, it looks like there aren't any. Looks like that's it for the questions. So thanks again for joining, and hopefully we will see you next month.